Hello viewer and welcome to another Toybox audio video demonstration video, but it's not a deep dive. We'll just be looking at the Granular Sample player, which was recently added to the free pack, moved from one of the other packs. I forget which one. I think probably maybe the sample pack. And I've constructed a little tune here to show you different ways to use the Granular Sample player in your blocks, productions, and environments. So let's start. Let's have a look at what the hell I've created. So what have we got first? We've got a kick. So, yes, we recognise that as being a kick, but the nature of Granular Sample players means that depending on how the engine has been made, that not every hit will start from the beginning of the file, because different grains might pick up the position of the scan. This isn't, we don't have time for a granular lesson. I will just use terminology that is from that domain, and hopefully you'll pick it up if you're not familiar with it as we go along. So we've cut the sound into tiny little pieces using the length knob here. So the longer we make it, the more fluffy it is, because each grain is massive and it's all being overlapped because of the density parameter we have here. So if we pull the length back so that we can be sure that the grains aren't too big and that there isn't too many of them, that the sound becomes too blurry and unfocused, and there's enough of them so the sound doesn't just stop like that. So if we have it really short and we have a lot of short grains, let's make it even shorter. Add all those grains up, and it's playing the file back, but it's not. It's kind of less true to what the file was. It sounds good, I like it, but it's not. It's not kind of what I was going for initially. I want some weight there, so I'm going to pull the density back, increase the length, not by much. That's what I want to hear. I want that transient to feel more. So even though the length of the grains is still very, very tiny, we've just got enough of it so we can hear the hot action of the kick that we want to exploit. So there you go. We can pitch it up and down. Might sound better up here. Not sure. One thing I will highlight is that with a granular sampler, there's a way of describing to the engine how to move through the file. So it's not like a normal sampler where we just read every sample in a row. A granular sampler starts at a point and reads a little bit, adds it to a bit of buffer, and then plays that buffer back. And that's what all the grains are. It's just like the main sound being added to lots of little buffers and then played back as the grains. And part of that operation is called the scan. So we're scanning through the file, and this is what the speed here and this little switch up here kind of allows you to change and adjust. So I've got it mapped to the tempo. So the scanning of the file is mapped to the tempo. This isn't usually what you do. You might usually do that with a beat or something you might want to keep matched to the tempo, or things that you might want to scan through the file in a rate that's relative to the tempo of the track that you're making at the time, or the sound, or whatever you're making. I've just got it doing that because it made sense to me at the time when I was making the noise to have it controlled like that. So even if we just play it different pitches, we can play it all different crazy positions, but it's scanning through it in exactly the same rate, which is not what you get with a normal sampler. Obviously, the higher the pitch you play, the faster the sample is scanned through. With the granular stuff, you can chop them into little pieces and listen to all the pieces as we scan through slowly. So, for example, I can pull this back down to a very slow speed. And that's now scanning through this kick drum file at a pitch that I I'm pressing a very high note on my keyboard, and you can hear the grains that it's being chopped up into and played back at a very high speed. So that's basically what's going on. I will pull it back down again. That's a lower note. Again, an even lower note. We're scanning through the file at the same rate, notice. So what I'm going to do is speed that up. I'll show you quickly the other mode, which is the kind of pitched mode. And this will scan through the file at the rate relative to the note. So if I play it lower, that's actually going through it slower. And that should be. Regardless, that's the principle. So you would then, this knob here, the speed, describes how much faster than the pitched speed you want the sample to be scanned through. So you can just run through it super fast and only hear the end, or scan through it nice and slowly. But I kind of wanted to map it to the tempo because it just feels better. So if I... There we go. Tweak the knobs. So we get a nice start. There you go. That's the kick track. That's the kick line. Let's move to a snare. So that's a snare. It's a snare sound. As you can see, it's been pitched down. From there, its default pitch down to an octave. And again, we will just listen to what happens if we chop up into little pieces and reduce the density. Smaller pieces. More grains. Oh, that's nice. What happens if we just lengthen the grains, increase the length of the grains a tiny little bit? Can you hear that kind of overlapping, making that squeak? That's kind of nice. I like that. I think it's the kind of thing Flume exploits with his granular activities. And you get these crazy kind of industrial noises. So, yeah, I don't want to spend too long mucking around with this, but there we go, super fast. And obviously I've not got any modulation on any of these knobs. We are just hearing the raw sound as played back by the sampler. What I'm going to do, just want to increase it a little bit. What I'm going to do is add a bit of density jitter so I can blur that kind of pitch a little bit. Sounds like a growl or some weird animal in pain. I do apologise for that. That sounds like a rub. Like someone's rubbing some metal with a brush. Anyway, that's a great snare sound, as we all need snare sounds that sound like scraping brush along a lump of metal. Let's just put it back to kind of what we had. Ish. Again, it doesn't always start from the crack because of the way the grains are being kind of filled and then played back. So there's a snare. What have we got next? Let's have a look at this interesting hi-hat kind of track. So let's reduce the density again. And just listen to the raw material. Also, there's some stuff going on here that I should point out to you because it's quite useful and fun for creativity. A list, we just have 7, is that 7 hi-hats loaded? Yes. And we have a round robin thing happening here. So it doesn't matter which note is triggered. These are crazy notes all over the place. And the engine is just being told to play the next sample in the buffer. That's, as you can see what's going on there. Each next sample is being played. We can reduce that round robin length by saying cycling only through the first 3 or however many you like. And we can also, I think there's a question mark which randomly picks a sample. So I'm just going to stick it on 7 for the moment because I kind of want it to cycle through those hi-hats. Quite a cool sound. But what else have we got here? Let us close this window and turn the length up so we can hear a little bit more of those snare samples. And then what happens if we turn up the density? We get craziness. What if I slow down? Just turn up these. Obviously, it's still a monophonic engine, so only one sample can be played at a time. But there's some great stuff going on there, wouldn't you say? Because this is kind of not pitched content, we can turn the length down quite a bit for a cool sound. Turn up the density, and it just sort of retains the thing that it was initially, but it's now a bit otherworldly, trickily, kind of wobbly. What else can we do? Let's turn up the jitter. This is change the pitch of all the grains. Because they're so short, let's turn it up. You can hear it. Kind of sounds like noise. But let's just slowly increase the grain size. What happens if we go? Just push the... Oh, yeah. Nice. Yes. I like the sound of this. Oh, and when you do have a few samples loaded in and you just want to play around with them, like I'm doing here, I believe you can... This knob, when you've got a bank of samples selected, this knob basically sort of you can sort of say start from here. So this will now only play from 3 down to 7. But because it wants to include another 2 in the round robin, it stays on the last one for a couple of triggers. So if we reduce that to 5 now, it will just now cycle through these 5 samples. So you can kind of control which area of the sample map you want to loop. Kind of loop when you want to cycle around. The samples you want to round robin, let's say, because that's the correct terminology. So yeah, there's your hi-hats. Should probably, normally I'd be like turn the release up. Oh yeah, it's nice. Ooh. Okay, cool. Let's look at a kind of multi-layer, multi-drum beat. That's what it is. So what is this? What have we got here? It's another sampler, and this sampler has a bank of samples in, and this little icon here, when lit, tells the engine to map the samples to keys, so you can play them back like a drum machine type thing, you know, C as your kick or whatever. And with that functionality, you should also be aware of this here, which enables you to say where you want the lowest note to start. So I can just change that to, now it's all messes around with the map. The map's all screwed. Got to put it back to where it was. And so sample, this top one, sample tambourine 3 is on C2. You can see that happen. You can't see the pattern, but I promise you, tambourine 3 is on C2. And so that's what, that's quite cool. You can sort of turn it into a drum machine, which is quite cool. But with that, what can you do? Can you break the noises? Of course you can. Why not? Why would you even say that you couldn't break the noises? That's all we want to do, really. Density jitter. Position jitter. Let's keep that as 0 because that's just, all these sounds are quite short. Density jitter, length jitter. So I feel as if I go back here, turn up the density, the sounds will suddenly become more magical and full. Boy, was I right. That's quite cool. So you shorten the length and you get the transient kind of short noises. The longer you make that, the kind of longer and more sustained the drum noises. Let's just turn that up. Nice. That's drum noises. Here's the rest of them all together, fighting for your attention. Take out the hats. Let's just leave these crazy drums and the hats. Okay, let's move on, because that was the drums, to a bass noise. So what is this bass noise? It is a electric bass sound, a picked electric bass sound dumped into the sampler. And we have a length which is quite big because we want to ensure that the grains have at least one cycle of the bass oscillation. So the grains have to be slightly bigger than one oscillation and one cycle of the bass sound. And we can show that by here. If I just turn the length down, we can't really hear the bass note because the grains are so small, they don't have one cycle of it in. So if there'll be a point when we suddenly start to capture all some of it's there. It's still a bit messy. Let's make it Let's turn the FM down because I'm going to come to that in a second. So there's the picked bass sound. And if you make it, it's noisy. That's a cool noise. It's a cool bass noise. But for the purposes of this display, I want it clean. So I'm going to turn the grain size up. And I really enjoy this kind of panoramic warmth. It's like because the grains are being distributed randomly in the stereo spectrum, we just get this width that can't be recreated with things like unison plugins or stereo widthizers or, you know, crazy delays or whatever. This is only possible in something like this because the way that the grains are reading back the source file and the way they're being panned around and delayed and all these kinds of fun things mean that you can't just recreate the width and the kind of organic nature of the sound with a load of plugins after a sample player, which I think is quite cool. That's the kind of one of the ways of working out how to exploit granular technology, granular sample players, finding the things that only they can do. Oh dear, that's my internet causes crazy loops. I don't know if you can hear that, but it's affecting what I can hear. So the bass sound here, what have we got? We've got a bass sound, like I said, loaded in. It's quite basic. Grain size big enough for at least 2 or 3 cycles of the bass sound to happen in. Let's turn the density down, see what we've got. Yeah, so you can very clearly hear a note in that grain. Let's just add more of the grains. And if we slow down the scanning, we can hear more of the high frequency content of the first part of that sample, but then we speed it up. And because of the way the grains are being provided, the little bit of sound that the scanning part of the granular engine is looking at, it's different every time. Speed it up. We might not catch the high frequency content because we're moving through it so fast. I think this is like 6 right, we can go up to 10,000%, or is that 1,000? It's 10,000%. So we can go through it quite fast if you so choose. I'm going to put it down there because I want to hear the frequency content. And I'm just going to up the jitter a tiny bit because I really like the additional complexities that it adds. So there's a bass noise. Hold on, we hadn't done the FM yet. So let's just quickly look at the FM. What's going on? So we're FMing each of the grains with the signal that's coming in to the FM input, which is a mini oscillator. Very clean sine wave, so there's not doing anything crazy. But we're playing back, so we're frequency modulating each of these little grains and playing them back, kind of like with a really fast vibrato that is fed by this signal here. How far does it go? That's kind of cool for a granular sample player, right? What happens if we go? There you go, that's kind of super low FM. And then we go an octave above. That's quite a lot of fun. And if we do it, yeah, I mean, obviously this whole shape is modulating the FM, frequency modulating the grains. So the more complex it is, the more crazy harmonics and stuff's gonna. So that is a bass sound. As you can hear, it's a bass sound. grungy, isn't it? I like that. So let's move on to the X sound, to the X numbered sound, which is just a simple digital vocal sample, again dumped into the sampler player. Let's look at it rather than the bass. There we go. So there's not much odd stuff going on here, because the sample's fairly static all the way through. You can start it from... What's going to be happening is it's just a slightly different volume. Again, we want the grains to be big enough to capture a few cycles. So that's how big they are. So if we had put a load of those in a row and overlap them, we get a lovely dense choral team choir. So yeah, these kinds of knobs won't do much at the moment with this kind of sound, but we can do crazy jitter. And we're going to look at jitter in a second. But I think, don't forget these jitter controls as well. They just add useful, simple complexities into your sound. Depending on the nature of the sound, some of them might not make much difference at all immediately. Things like position won't, for example, in this one, because the file is the same all the way through. But when we're affecting things like the jitter and the length, so if you make them both really short and then jitter them a lot, that's basically now these are being randomly modulated. So it'll be quite unstable, which is what you're looking for. That's what you're going to get. And there we go. I think we've even got a bit of FM in here as well. What happens? Oh, it's very slow. Let's put it up to... From some previous experiments. Let's just put that at an octave. Max it out. That's FM. You can just touch the edges of it. Picture a sign. Keep it smooth. Again, this is playing back the pitch that's coming in to the granular sample as well. So the pitch that the FM engine is applying to the grains is the same as the pitch of the grain. So they should be harmonically related, as long as the notes, as long as this one is like an octave below, you know, or related kind of frequency-wise, some kind of multiplication factor of the main pitch. Anyway. That's a lovely, horrible noise. And what's this last one? Oh, yes. This is interesting. So here's where we take advantage of the jitter. So if we look at what's going on here, this is just, again, a basic sound, basic kind of note. What is it? I think it's even pipes, flauto pipes. Yeah, that's what that is. Static file, same all the way through. And we've got a reasonably long length, few other layers of grains happening, densities like not at zero. If it was a zero, it would sound weird because there's only one note on. So if we have no density and well, a setting, length is a setting. We only get a sound when we have a note on. That's it. So that's it. That's a note on. Here we go. Another one. And that is how these kind of things work. So we need density up for the other grains to do something. And the more we increase density, the more additional grains we get. So now I hear you asking in your head, what's going on with that pitch stuff? Like, there's no other notes going on. So what is going on? So let's have a look. Look, we've got this modulation here. There's a modulation A is receiving something. What is it receiving? It's receiving a signal from this oscillator. And that's just doing like a sawtooth upside down ramp, or ramp, however you want to see it. And that's being fed into modulation A, and we're reapplying it to the jitter function. But there's still the notes. Previously, when we'd adjusted the jitter, it just goes kind of noisy and slightly chaotic and gives you grains that are above and below the pitch that the content you're playing with is at. So what's going on here? Let's have a look at this panel. So we click on this big cog here, I said, and we look at these four knobs here. We've already looked at these. Those are kind of general jitter knobs, but these are the important ones. So what we can say is that the jitter, the grains that are a result of the jitter calculation can be pitched relative to the note. Interesting. So what have I got here? I've got a note D playing, which is what's coming out of the sampler. So I'm sending it a note D, and we've got the jitter. We've got the key here set to G, and the scale is pentatonic. I think it's pentatonic minor, because there's another pentatonic, and it's over on the 9 o'clock side of this dial, whereas this is at the 3 o'clock side. So we're basically saying any of the grains that are repitched as a result of the jitter function, force them to a scale. So, and what we're doing here is adjusting the jitter. So I'll turn this knob up here, this little modulation range up here, and we'll hear the jitter range increase even further. I can turn that down. This might be an easy way to display it. Let's just turn the jitter up. So all these notes are part of the pentatonic scale, the minor pentatonic in G. So we could go to G sharp. I mean, I don't need to show you different scales. Look, different scales. Crazy things. But let's put it back on the minor pentatonic we had. And so what we've got is a modulation that is increasing the jitter towards the end of the bar. So we get the little rush of notes. And interestingly, you don't really, I like this kind of interaction of the hardware, because I don't really have a control over which notes are going to come out of that little glissando sort of jitter output. So it's going to be different every time, pretty much. And that's the joy of doing these kinds of things. We're relying on a little bit of chaos and randomness to provide the changes that keep us interested in the music, and keep us listening, keep our ears glued. Let's just listen to whatever everything adds up to. What does everything add up to? It adds up to this. Grunge. Electronic grunge. Okay, and thank you for listening and watching. Hopefully you learned something. Go off and just make some blimmin' music, will you? Thank you for watching. Have a lovely day.